everybody, and welcome back. My name is Jade Fish, and whether you're here listening to this live or drifting in later to the VOD, I'm really glad you're here. This is our little ocean corner, just soft reading, thoughts, and floating around for a while. It feels calm today. Before we sink into the story, I have a small life update from the last stream. So, I made a mistake. I forgot to press record on OBS, which, if you don't know, OBS is what I'm using to stream, and it can also record for me. And since I forgot to press record on OBS last time, it meant I had to download my own stream directly from YouTube. And from there, I had to put it through some other stuff just so I can edit it and put it onto YouTube as a VOD. It was so unnecessarily painful. I am not a tech person. So yeah, lesson learned. From now on, I will always check and double check that I'm recording while I'm still on my stream starting soon screen. And this time I remembered to link my streaming and recording buttons together on OBS. So as long as I press start streaming, it will also automatically record. I am hoping this is the last time this will happen. Please. Anyway, that's why the last file was posted so late. I usually have it up by around 3 p.m. same day, well, my time. But this time, the currents were in my favor. Okay, so what's about today's stream? Today we'll be continuing Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Still using the physical copy, no sharing screens, just me turning the pages on this physical book. Last time we read chapters 6, 7, and 8, so today we'll be starting from chapter 9. Like always, I don't really have a strict reading goal for Pride and Prejudice. We'll just keep going. I'll read for about an hour or until I get tired or until my voice gives up on me like it always does and I start complaining like I always do. My friend was like, oh, if you're having trouble, why not do voice training? And I'm just here like, smart. But, counterpoint, I'm busy. So, maybe I'll look into it, maybe I won't. I'll tell you next time. Anyway, so you can see the whole time, or you can just in and out if you want. You can use this as background noise. So, before we start, I had a quick questions. What do you guys think about it so far? What characters do you like? What characters do you not like? What do you think? Personally, I think, one, like I said before, the mom is too often demonized in public and pop outside of the book. I feel like, yes, she's not the best mom in the world, but it's understandable where she comes from. So all the hate is just, while the hate on her character is valid, it's a little much. As for Mr. Bingley's sister, Caroline, I think Caroline was her name? Yeah, Caroline. I think, while she is very much not nice to Elizabeth and the rest of the Bennet family, I can't really defend her much. It's just that Elizabeth gave as much as she got, so I think it's fair. Well, not fair, but like tit for tat, you know? Even though Caroline is definitely worse, you have to also remember that she's probably a spoiled girl. Probably, I think she's the youngest of her sisters. So she's also got that younger sibling syndrome. And I think we all know that she likes Mr. Darcy. So obviously, she's going to try to make herself look the best to him. And it's going to come off as a little much. But that line back in the previous chapter about how Caroline called Elizabeth a girl who elevates herself in the eyes of men by putting other girls down. I'm like, damn, this book is from when was it? When was this published again? From the 1800s? Yeah, damn. This book's from the 1800s and today it's the 2026 and we still have the same conversations. Oh my god. Anyway, once I start reading, I'll mostly stay focused on the book. But I might pause here and there to react or give you my thoughts. But overall, this stream is still a very calm stream, so feel free to relax, study, draw, or just float around here for a bit. Alright, let's drift back into the story. This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Starting at Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Elizabeth passed the sheaf of the night in her sister's room, and in the morning had the pleasure of being able to send a tolerable answer to the inquiries which she very early received from Mr. Bingley by a housemaid, and some time afterwards from the two elegant ladies who waited on his sister. In spite of this amendment, however, she requested to have a note sent to Longbourn, desiring her mother to visit Jane, and form her own judgment of her situation. The note was immediately dispatched, and its contents as quickly complied with it. Mrs. Bennet, accompanied by her two youngest daughters, reached Netherfield soon after the family's breakfast. Had she found Jane in any apparent danger, Mrs. Bennet would have been very miserable. But being satisfied on seeing her that her illness was not alarming, she had no wish of her recovering immediately, as her restoration to health would probably remove her from Netherfield. She would not listen therefore to her daughter's proposal of being carried home. Neither did the apothecary, who arrived about the same time, think it at all advisable. After sitting a while with Jane on Miss Bingley's appearance and invitation, the mother and three daughters all attended her into the breakfast parlour. Bingley met them with hopes that Mrs. Bennet had not found Miss Bennet worse than she expected. "Indeed I have, sir," was her answer. "She is a great deal too ill to be moved. Mr. Jones says we must not think of moving her. We must trespass a little longer on your highness." "Be moved?" cried Bingley. "It must not be thought of. My sister, I am sure, will not hear of her removal." "You may depend upon it, madame," said Miss Bingley with cold civility, "that Miss Bennet shall receive every possible attention while she remains with us." Mrs. Bennet was profuse in her acknowledgments. "I am sure," she added, "if it were not for such good friends, I do not know what would become of her, for she is very ill indeed, and suffers a vast deal, though with greatest patience in the world, which is always the way with her, for she has, without exception, the sweetest temper I have ever met. I often tell my other girls they are nothing to her. You have a sweet room here, Mr. Bingley, and a charming prospect over that gravel walk. I do not know a place in the country that is equal to Netherfield. You will not think of putting it in a hurry. I hope, though, you have but a short lease. Whatever I do is done in a hurry, replied he, and therefore, if I should resolve to quit Netherfield, I should probably be off in 5 minutes. At present, however, I consider myself quite fixed here. That is exactly what I should have supposed of you, said Elizabeth. You begin to comprehend me, do you? He cried, turning towards her. Oh yes, I understand you perfectly. I wish I might take this for a compliment, but to be so easily seen through, I am quite afraid is pitiful. That is as it happens. It does not necessarily follow that a deep, intricate character is more or less estimatable than such a one as yours. Lizzie, cried her mother, remember where you are, and do not run on in a wild manner that you are suffered to do at home. I did not know before, continued Bingley immediately, that you were a studier of character. It must be amusing study. Yes, intricate characters are most amusing. They have at least that advantage. The country, said Darcy, can be generally supplied by a few subjects for such a study. On the contrary, a neighborhood you move in is in a very confined and unvarying society. But people themselves alter so much, and there is something new to be observed in them forever. Yes, indeed, cried Mrs. Bennet, offended by his manner of mentioning a country neighborhood. I assure you there is quite as much of that going on in the country as in town. Everybody was surprised, and Dorothy, after looking at her for a moment, turned silently away. Mrs. Bennet, who fancied she had gained a complete victory over him, continued her triumph. I cannot see that London has any great advantage over the country for my part except the shops and public places. The country is a vast deal pleasanter, is it not, Mr. Bingley? When I am in the country, he replied, I never wish to leave it, and when I am in town, it is pretty much the same. They have each their advantages, and I can be equally happy in either. Aye, that is because you have the right disposition. But that gentleman, looking at Darcy, seems to think the country was nothing at all. Indeed, mamma, you are mistaken, said Elizabeth, blushing for her mother. You quite mistook Mr. Darcy. He only meant that there is no such a variety of people to be met in the country as in town, which you must acknowledge to be true. Certainly, my dear, nobody said there were. But as to not meeting with many people in this neighborhood, I believe there are few neighborhoods larger. I know we dine with 24 families. Nothing but concern for Elizabeth could enable Bingley to keep his countenance. His sister was less delicate, and directed her eye towards Mr. Darcy with a very expressive smile. Elizabeth, for the sake of saying something that might turn her mother's thoughts, now asked her if Charlotte Lucas has been at Longbourn since her coming away. Yes, she called yesterday with her father. What an agreeable man Sir William is, Mr. Bingley, is he not? So much the man of fashion, so gentle and so easy. He has always something to say to everybody. That is my idea of good reading. Those persons who fancy themselves very important and never open their mouths quite mistake the matter. Did Charlotte dine with you? No, she went home. I fancy she was wanting about the mince pies. For my part, Mr. Bingley, I always keep servants that can do their work. My daughters are brought up differently, but everybody is to judge for themselves, and the Lucas are very good sort of girls, I assure you. It is a pity they are not handsome. Not that I think that Charlotte is so very plain, but then she is our particular friend. She seems a very pleasant young woman, said Bingley. Oh dear, yes, but you must own she is very plain. Lady Lucas herself often said so, and envied Jane's beauty. I do not like to boast of my own child, but to be sure, Jane, one does not often see anybody better looking. It is what everybody says. I do not trust my own particularity. When she was only 15, there was a gentleman at my brother's gardener's in town, so much in love with her that my sister-in-law was sure he would make her an offer before we came away. But however, he did not. Perhaps he thought her too young. However, he wrote some verses on her, and very pretty they were. And so ended his affection, said Elizabeth impatiently. There has been many a one, I fancy, overcome in the same way. I wonder who first discovered the efficacy of poetry in driving away love. I have always used to consider poetry as the food of love, said Darcy. Of a fine, stout, healthy love it may. Even everything nourishes what is strong already. But it is only a slight, thin sort of inclination. I am convinced that one good sonnet will starve it away entirely. Darcy only smiled, and the general pause which ensued soon made Elizabeth tremble lest her mother should be exposing herself again. She longed to speak, but could not think of anything to say, and after a short silence, Mrs. Bennet began repeating her thanks to Mr. Bingley for his kindness to Jane, and an apology for troubling him with Lizzie. Mr. Bingley was unexpectedly civil in his answer, and forced his younger sister to be civil also, and say what the occasion required. She performed her part, indeed, without much graciousness, but Mrs. Bennet was satisfied, and soon afterwards ordered her carriage. Upon this signal, the youngest of her daughters put herself forward. The two girls had been whispering to each other during the whole visit, and the result of it was that the youngest should tax Mr. Bingley with having promised on his first coming into the country to give a ball at Netherfield. Lydia was a stout, well-grown girl of 15, with a fine complexion and good-humoured countenance. A favourite with her mother, whose affection had brought her into the public at an early age. She had high animal spirits and a sort of natural self-consequence, which the attraction of the officers to whom her uncle's good dinners and her own easy manners recommended her, had increased into assurance. She was very equal, therefore, to address Mr. Bingley on the subject of the ball, and abruptly reminded him of his promise, adding that it would be the most shameful thing in the world if he didn't keep it. His answer to this sudden attack was delightful to their mother's ear. I am perfectly ready, I assure you, to keep my encouragement, and when your sister is recovered, you shall, if you please, name the very day of the ball. But you would not wish to be dancing while she is ill. Lydia declared herself satisfied. Oh yes, it would be much better to wait till Jane is well, and by that time, most likely Captain Carter will be at Marytown again. And when you have given your ball, she added, I shall insist on their giving one. Also, I shall tell Colonel Foster it would be quite shameful if he does not. Mrs. Bennet and her daughters had departed, and Elizabeth returned instantly to Jane, leaving her own relations' behaviour to the remarks of the two ladies and Mr. Darcy, the latter of whom, however, could not be prevailed on to join in their censure of her, in spite of all Mrs. Bingley's witticisms on fine eyes. So, I take back everything I said during my just chatting section of the stream. I guess, Mrs. Bennet is very pushy indeed. I would be so embarrassed if my mom said that. Like, how could you keep doing... There's a time and place, and that definitely wasn't the time or place. Not only that, but Jane is still there. She's gonna have to keep talking to these people. Poor Jane. But I guess we can see where Elizabeth gets her prejudice from. As much as Elizabeth seems embarrassed by her mom in this chapter, Everybody can maybe tell that she got a bit of her disposition from her mom. Got her dad's sharp tongue and her mom's prejudice. This is gonna be great. Chapter 10. The day passed much as the day before had done. Mrs. Hertz and Miss Bingley had spent some hours of the morning with the invalid, who continued though slowly to mend, and in the evening Elizabeth joined their party in the drawing room. The loo table, however, did not appear. Mr. Darcy was writing, and Miss Bingley, seated near him, was watching the progress of his letter, and repeatedly calling off his attention by messages to his sister. Mr. Hertz and Mr. Bingley were at piquet, and Mrs. Hertz was observing their game. Elizabeth took up some needlework, and was sufficiently amused in the attending to what had passed between Darcy and his companion. The perpetual recommendation of the lady either on his writing, or on the eveningness of his lines, or on the length of his letter, but the perfect unconcern with which her praises were received, formed a curious dialogue that was exactly in unison with her opinion of each. How delighted Miss Darcy would be to receive such a letter! He made no answer. You write uncommonly fast. You are mistaken. I write rather slowly. How many letters you must have occasion to write in the course of the year? Letters of business, too. How odious I should think of them. It is fortunate, then, that they fall to my lot instead of yours. Pray tell your sister that I long to see her. I have already told her so once, by your desire. I am afraid you do not like your pen. Let me mend it for you. I mend pens remarkably well. Thank you, but I always mend my own. How can you contrive to write so evenly? He was silent. Tell your sister I am delighted to hear of her improvement on the harp. Pray let her know that I am quite in raptures with her beautiful little design on a table, and I think it's infinitely superior to Miss Grantley's. Will you give me leave to defer your raptures till I write again? At present, I have not room to do them justice. Oh, it is of no consequence. I shall see her in January. But do you always write such charmingly long letters to her, Mr. Darcy? They are generally long, but whether always charming, it is not up for me to determine. It is a rule with me that a person who can write a long letter with ease cannot write ill. That will not do for a compliment to Darcy, Caroline, cried her brother, because he does not write with ease. He studies too much for words of 4 syllables. Do not you, Darcy? My style of writing is very different from yours. Oh, cried Miss Bingley, Charles writes in the most careless way imaginable. He leaves out half his words and blots the rest. My ideas flow so rapidly that I do have not time to express them, by which means my letters sometimes convey no ideas at all to my correspondent. The humility, Mr. Bingley, said Elizabeth, must disarm reproof. Nothing is more deceitful, said Darcy, than the appearance of humility. It is often only carelessness of opinion, and sometimes an indirect boast. And which of the two do you call my little recent piece of modesty? An indirect boast, for you are really proud of your defects in writing because you consider them as proceeding with a rapidity of thought and carelessness of execution, which, if not estimable, you think at least highly interesting. The power of doing any with quickness is always much praised by the possessor, and often without attention to the imperfections of the performance. When you told Mrs. Bennet this morning that if you ever resolve on quitting Netherfield, you should be gone in 5 minutes, you meant to be a sort of pedigree of compliment to yourself. And yet there's so very laudable and precipitates, which must leave very necessary business undone, and can have no real advantage to yourself or any other? Nay, cried Bingley, this is too much. to remember at night all the foolish things that were said in the morning. And yet, upon my honor, I believe that I set on myself to be true. I believe at this moment. At least, therefore, I did not assume the character of needles precipitants merely to shrew off before the ladies. I dare say you believe it, but I am by no means convinced that you would be gone with such celerity. Your conduct would be quite as dependent on chance as any man I know, and if as you were mounting your horse a friend were to say, Bingley, you had better stay till next week, you would probably do it. You would probably not go, and at another word might stay a month. You have only proved by this, cried Elizabeth, that Mr. Bingley did not just do justice to his own disposition. You have shewn him off now much more than he did himself. I am extremely gratified, said Bingley, by your converting what my friend said into a compliment on the sweetness of my temper. But I am afraid you are giving it a turn which the gentleman did by no means intend. He would certainly think the better of me if under such circumstances I was to give a flat denial and ride off as fast as I could. But Mr. Darcy then considered the rashness of your original intentions as a tone by which are your obstinacy in adherence to it? Upon my word, I cannot exactly express the matter. Darcy must speak for himself. You expect me to account for opinions which you chose to call mine, but which I have never acknowledged. Allowing the case, however, to stand according to your representation, you must remember, Miss Bennet, that a friend who is supposed to desire his return to the house and the delay of his plans has merely desired it, acts without offering one argument in favor of propriety. To yield readily, easily to the persuasion of a friend is no merit with you. To yield without conviction is no compliment to the understanding of either. You appear to me, Mr. Darcy, to allow nothing of the influence of friendship and affection. A regard for the requester would often make one readily yield to a request, without waiting for arguments to reason one into it. I am not particularly speaking of such a case you have supposed about Mr. Bingley. We may as well wait perhaps till the circumstance occurs before we discuss the direction of his behavior thereupon. But in general and ordinary cases between friend and friend, where one of them is desired by other to change a resolution of no great moment, should you think ill of that person complying with the desire without wanting to be argued into it? Will it not be advisable, therefore, we proceed on this subject to arrange with rather precision the degree of importance which is apparent to this request, as well as the degree of intimacy subsisting between parties? By all means, cried Bingley, let us hear the particular, not forgetting their comparative height and size, for that will more weight in the argument, Miss Bingley, than you may be aware of. I assure you that if Darcy were not such a great tall fellow, in comparison with myself, I should not pay him half so much deference. I declare I do not know a more awful object than Darcy, on particular occasions, and in particular places, at his own house especially, and of a Sunday evening, when he has nothing to do. Mr. Darcy smiled, but Elizabeth thought she could perceive that he was rather offended, and therefore checked her laughter. Miss Bingley warmly represented the indignity he received in an expostulation with her brother for talking such nonsense. I see your design, Bingley, said his friend. You dislike an argument, and want to silence this. Perhaps I do. Arguments are too much like disputes. If you and Miss Bennet will defer yours until I'm out of the room, I shall be very thankful. And then you may say whatever you like of me. What you ask, said Elizabeth, is no sacrifice on my side, and Mr. Darcy had much better finish his letter. Mr. Darcy took her advice and did finish his letter. When the business was over, he applied to Miss Bingley and Elizabeth for the indulgence of some music. Miss Bingley moved with Alec Sissy to the pianoforte, and after a polite request that Elizabeth would lead the way, which the other had as politely and more earnestly navigated, she seated herself. Miss Hurd sang with her sister, and while they were thus employed, Elizabeth could not help observing, as she turned over some music books that lay on the instrument, how frequently Mr. Darcy's eyes were fixed on her. She hardly knew how to suppose that she could be an object of admiration to so great a man, and yet that he should look at her because he disliked her was still more strange. He could only imagine, however, at last when she drew his notice because there was something about her more wrong than reprehensible according to his idea of right than in any other person present. This disposition did not pain her. She liked him too little to care about his approbation. After playing some Italian songs, Miss Bingley varied the charm by a lively Scottish air, and soon afterwards Mr. Darcy, drawing near Elizabeth, said to her, Do not you feel a great inclination, Miss Bennet, to seize such an opportunity of dancing a reel? She smiled, but made no answer. He repeated the question, which with some surprise at herself. Oh, she said, I heard you before, but I could not immediately determine what to say in reply. You wanted me, I know, to say yes, that you might have the pleasure of despising my taste. I am always delighted in overthrowing those kinds of schemes, and cheating a person of their premeditated conceptions. I have therefore made up my mind to tell you that I do not want to dance a reel at all. And now despise me if you dare. Indeed, I do dare. Elizabeth, having expected to affront him, was amazed at his gallantry. But there was a mixture of sweetness and archness in her manner which made it difficult for her to affront anybody. And Darcy had never been so bewitched by any woman as he was by her. He really believed that were it not for her inferiority of her connections, he should be in some danger. Miss Bingley saw or suspected enough to be jealous, and a great anxiety for the recovery of her dear friend Jane received some assurance from her desire of getting rid of Elizabeth. She often tried to provoke Darcy into disliking her guest, by talking about their supposed marriage and planning his happiness in such an alliance. I hope, said she, as they were walking together in the shrubbery the next day, you will give your mother-in-law a few hints, when this desirable event takes place, as to the advantage of holding her tongue. And if you compress it, do cure the younger girls of running after the officers. And if I may mention so delicate a subject, endeavor to check that little something bordering on conceit and impudence which your lady possesses. Have you anything else to propose of my domestic felicity? Oh yes, do let the portraits of your uncle and aunt Phillips be placed in the gallery of Perbury. Put them next to your great uncle the judge. They are in the same profession, you know, so in different lines. As for your Elizabeth's picture, you must not attempt to have it taken. For what painter would do justice to those beautiful eyes? It would be easy. It would not be easy, indeed, to capture their expression. But their color and shape, and the eyelashes so remarkably fine, might be copied. At that moment, they were met from another walk by Mrs. Hurst and Elizabeth herself. I did not know you were intended to walk, said Miss Bingley, in some confusion, lest they were overheard. You use us abominably ill, answered Mrs. Hurst, and running away without telling us that you were coming out. Then, taking the disengaged arm of Mr. Darcy, she left Elizabeth to walk by herself. The path just admitted 3. Mr. Darcy felt their rudeness and immediately said, This walk is not wide enough for our party. We had better go into the avenue. But Elizabeth, who had not the least inclination to remain with them, laughingly answered, No, stay where you are. You are charmingly grouped, and appeared to uncommon advantage. The picturesque would be spoiled by omitting a fourth. Goodbye. She then ran grandly off, rejoining as she rambled about in the hopes of being at home again in a day or two. Jane was already so much recovered as to intend leaving her room for a couple hours that evening. That chapter was done. What do you think? Personally, I think the line, "To remember at night all the foolish things that were said in the morning," that line, that hit me. That hit me hard. I'm always just lying down in bed, thinking and rethinking of all the things I did that I should have done differently. Like, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said this, or I should have done this, or I should not have done this. And then you just wish over and over again that you just jump back in time for like a few hours just to fix that one thing so that a better outcome would happen, or you wouldn't cringe as much by your own behavior. But yep. And Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth should have said yes to the real. But then again, she did think that Mr. Darcy was playing a prank on her. I get why. But also, oh my god, the tension. And also, Miss Bingley is very jealous. But maybe she should. Mr. Darcy has money and looks. So I get why Miss Bingley wants him. But you also have to be able to talk with your partner. When you're in a relationship, you have to be able to communicate. Even if you can't just fill the silence with just, "Oh, this is pretty. Oh, you did this really well. Oh. No, that's not a conversation. That's just be boring." With Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy has verbal sparring. It's never a dull moment. And in contrast with his conversation with Miss Bingley, it's dull. There's no spark. Let's see. I think I can read two more chapters, and then we'll call it Chapter 11. When the ladies removed after dinner, Elizabeth ran up to her sister and, seeing her well guarded from cold, and attended her into the drawing room, where she was welcomed by her two friends with many professions of pleasure. Elizabeth had never seen them so agreeable as they were during the hour which passed before the gentlemen appeared. Their power of conversation was considerable. They could describe an entertainment with accuracy, relating an anecdote with humor, and laughed at their acquaintance with spirit. But when the gentlemen entered, Jane was no longer their first object. Miss Bingley's eyes were instantly turned towards Darcy, and she had something to say to him before he had advanced many steps. He addressed himself directly to Miss Bennet, with a polite congratulation. Mr. Hertz also made her a slight bow, and said he was very glad, but diffuseness at once remained from Bingley's salutations. He was full of joy and attention. The first half hour was spent in piling up the fire lest she should suffer from the change of room, and she removed at his desire at the other side of the fireplace, that she might be further from the door. He sat down by her and talked scarcely to anyone else. Elizabeth, at work in the opposite corner, saw it all with great delight. When tea was over, Mr. Hertz reminded his sister-in-law of the card table, but in vain. She had obtained private intelligence that Mr. Darcy did not wish for cards, and Mr. Hertz soon found even his open petition rejected. He assured him that no one intended to play, and the silence of the whole party on this subject seemed to justify her. Mr. Hertz had therefore nothing to do but to stretch himself on one of the sofas and go to sleep. Darcy took a book, Bingley did the same, and Mrs. Hertz, principally occupied in playing with her bracelets and rings, joined now and then in her brother's conversation with Miss Bennet. Miss Bingley's attention was quite as much engaged in watching Mr. Darcy progress through his book as in reading her own, and she was perpetually either making some inquiry or looking at his page. She could not win him, however, in any conversation. He merely answered her question and read on. At length, quite exhausted by the attempts to be amused with her own book, which she had only chosen because it was the second volume as his, he gave a great yawn and said, "How pleasant it is to spend an evening in this way. I declare, after all, there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything other than a book. When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I do not have an excellent library." No one made any reply. She then yawned again, threw aside her book, and cast her eyes around the room in quest of some amusement. When her brother mentioning a ball to Miss Bennet, she turned suddenly towards him and said, "By and by, Charles, are you really serious and meditating a dance in Netherfield? I would advise you, before you determine on it, to counsel the wishes of the present party. I am very much mistaken if there are no some among us who a ball would be rather a punishment than a pleasure." "If you mean Darcy," cried her brother, "he may go to bed, if he chooses, before it begins. But as for the ball, it is quite a settled thing, and as soon as Nicholas has made white soup enough, I shall send round my cards." "I should like balls infinitely better," she replied, "if they were carried on in a different manner. But there is something insufferably tedious in the process of such a meeting, and it surely be much more rational if conversation instead of dancing made the order of the day." "Much more rational, my dear Caroline, I dare say, but it would not be near so much like a ball." Miss Bingley made no answer, and soon afterward got up and walked about the room. Her figure was elegant, and she walked well, but Darcy, at whom it was all aimed, was still inflexibly studious. In the desperation of her feelings, she resolved one effort more, and turning to Elizabeth, said, "Miss Elizabeth Bennet, let me persuade you to follow my example and take a turn around the room. I assure you it is very refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude." Elizabeth was surprised but agreed to it immediately. Miss Bingley succeeded no less in the real objective of her civility, Mr. Darcy looking up. He was as much awake to the novel attention in that quarter as Elizabeth herself could be, and unconsciously closed his book. He was directly invited to join their party, but he declined, observing that he could imagine but two motives of their choosing to walk up and down the room together, with either of which motives his joining would interfere. What could he mean? He was dying to know what could his meaning, and asked Elizabeth whether she could at all understand him. "Not at all," was her answer, "but depend upon it he means it to be severe on us, and a surest way of disappointing him will be to ask nothing about it." Miss Bingley, however, was incapable of disappointing Mr. Darcy in anything, and preserved therefore to requiring an explanation of his two motives. "I have not the smallest objection to explaining them," said he, as soon as she allowed him to speak. "You either choose this method of passing the evening because you are either in each other's confidence and have a secret affair to discuss, or because you are conscious that your figure appears to the greatest advantage in walking. If the first, I should be completely in your way. If the second, I can admire as much as I sit by the fire." "Oh, shocking," said Miss Bingley. "I never heard of anything so abominable. How shall we punish him for such a speech?" "Nothing so easy if you have but the inclination," said Elizabeth. "We can all pledge and punish one another, tease him, laugh at him, intimidate as you are. You must know how it is to be done." "Upon my honor, I did not. I do assure you that my intimacy has not yet taught me that. He is calmness of temper and presence of mind. No, I feel he may defy us there, and as to laughter, we will expose ourselves, if you please, by attempting to laugh without a subject. Mr. Darcy may hug himself." "Mr. Darcy is not to be laughed at," cried Elizabeth. "That is an uncommon advantage. An uncommon, I hope it will continue, for it will be a great loss to me to have such an acquaintance. I dearly love a laugh. Miss Bingley, he has given me credit for more than I can be. The wisest and the best of men, nay, the wisest and the best of their actions, may be rendered ridiculous by a person whose first object in life is a joke. Certainly, replied Elizabeth, there are such people, but I hope I am not one of them. I hope I never ridicule what is wise or good. Follies and nonsense, whims of inconsistencies, do divert me, I own, and I laugh at them whenever I can. But these, I suppose, are precisely what you are without. Is that perhaps it is not possible for one another? Perhaps it is not possible for anyone. But it has been the study of my own life to avoid such weaknesses which often expose a strong understanding to ridicule. Such vanity and pride. Yes, vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is a real superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation. Elizabeth turned away to hide a smile. Their explanation of Mr. Darcy is over, I presume, said Miss Bingley, and pray what is the result? I am perfectly convinced by it that Mr. Darcy has no defect. He owns it himself without disguise. No, said Darcy, I have made no such pretense. I have faults enough, but they are not, I hope, of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for. It is, I believe, too little yielding. Certainly too little for the convenience of the world. I cannot forget the follies and vices of others so soon as I ought, nor their offences against myself. My feelings are not puffed about with every attempt to move them. My temper would perhaps be called resentful. My good opinion, once lost, is lost forever. That is a failing indeed, cried Elizabeth. Implacable resentment is a shade in the character. But you have chosen your fault well. I certainly cannot laugh at it. You are safe from me. There is, I believe, a certain disposition, a tendency to some particular evil, a natural defect, which not even the best education can overcome. And your defect is a propensity to hate everybody. And yours, he said with a smile, is willfully misunderstood. And yours, he replied with a smile, is willfully to misunderstand them. Do let us have a little music, cried Miss Bingley, tired of a conversation in which she had no share. Louisa, you will not mind my waking Mr. Hertz? Her sister made no small objection, and the pianoforte was open, and Darcy, after a minute of recollection, was not sorry for it. He began to feel the danger of playing with too much attention. I mean, at least Mr. Darcy is honest with his flaws. At least he knows that it is a flaw, that once his good opinion is gone, it's gone forever. At least he's aware of it. That means it's something he can change if he chooses to. But I think it'll take a while for him to do that. I don't really have much thoughts for this chapter, and I think I'll just power through the next one, which is a short one, and we'll call it a day. Chapter 12. In consequence of an agreement between the sisters, Elizabeth wrote the next morning to her mother to beg that the carriage might be sent for them in the course of the day. But Miss Bennet, who had calculated on her daughter remaining at Netherfield till the following Tuesday, which would exactly finish Jane's week, could not bring herself to receive them with pleasure before. Her answer, therefore, was not propitious, at least not Elizabeth's wishes, but she was impatient to get home. Mrs. Bennet sent them word that they could not possibly have the carriage before Tuesday, and in her postscript it was added that if Mr. Bingley and his sister pressured them to stay longer, she could spare them as very well. Against staying longer, however, Elizabeth was positively resolute, nor did she express it would be asked, and fearful, on the contrary, as being considered as entreating themselves needlessly long, urged Jane to borrow Mr. Bingley's carriage immediately, and at length it was settled that their original design was at leaving Netherfield that morning should be mentioned and requests made. The communication excited many professions of concern, and enough was said wishing them to stay till the following day to work on Jane. Until the morrow, their going was deferred. Miss Bingley was then sorry she had proposed delay, for her jealous and dislike of one sister much exceeded her affection for the other. The master of the house was real sorrow that they were going so soon, and repeatedly tried to persuade Miss Bennet that it would not be safe for her, as she is not well recovered, but Jane was firm that she felt herself to be right. To Mr. Darcy it was a welcome intelligence. Elizabeth had been at Netherfield long enough. She attracted him more than he liked, and Miss Bingley was uncivil to her, and more teasing than usual to himself. He wisely resolved to be particularly careful that no sign of admiration should now escape him. Nothing could elevate her with the hope of influencing his felicity. Sensible that if such an idea was been suggested, his behavior during the last day must have material weight in confirming or crushing it. Deadly to his purpose, he scarcely spoke 10 words to her the whole Saturday, and though there were one time left to themselves for half an hour, he adhered most conscientiously to his book, and would not even look at her. On Sunday, after the morning service, a separation so agreeable to almost all took place. Miss Bingley's civility to Elizabeth increased at last very rapidly, as well as her affection for Jane, and when they departed, after assuring the latter of the pleasure it would always give her to see her either at Longbourn or Netherfield, and embracing her most tenderly, she shook hands with the former. Elizabeth took leave of the whole party in the liveliest spirits. They were not welcomed home very cordially by their mother. Mrs. Bennet wondered at their coming, and thought them very wrong to give them so much trouble, and was sure Jane could have caught cold again. But their father, though very laconic in his expression of pleasure, was really glad to see them. He felt their importance in their family circle. The evening conversation, when they all assembled, had lost some of its animation, and almost all of its sense, by the absence of Jane and Elizabeth. They found Mary, as usual, deep in the study of thorough, vast, and human nature, and had some new extract to admire, and some new observations of their bred morality to listen to. Catherine and Lydia had information for them of a different sort. Much had been done, and much had been said in the regiment since preceding Wednesday, and several of the officers dined lately with their uncle, a private that had been flogged, and had actually been hinted that Colonel Foster was going to be married. That chapter was just about them getting home. I take back everything I said about Mrs. Bennet being a good mom. She might. How could you ask your daughter to just stay there longer for a man? I get it. You want her to get married. I get it. You think that your Jane will be perfectly fine, but she's sick. This is the 1800s. People get sick and die way too often. There's no proper medicine. She should be more worried. But that was chapter 12, and I think we can end it here. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stream. I hope this gave you some comfort during these trying times. And I hope you have a wonderful day, a lovely night, and if you're dreaming, peaceful dreams. Goodbye!